minds and hearts. This creation care dialogue is all about getting our hearts and minds and spirits aligned with Earth Sunday. And technically you can choose what Sunday you want to do Earth Sunday stuff. I like the idea that it's right after Easter, and that's close to the actual Earth Day. So there will probably be somewhat of an directional dialogue in the news feeds, in your timelines and all that stuff. So I like the idea of doing it on the 24th, which is when I'm helping a church celebrate it on the 24th. So do what you want. But I have just a piece of inspiration that I wanted to use to center ourselves. And this is called "You Are a Prophetic Leader." It's an article from what's called Earth Letter. It's an eco-justice newsletter from the ministry, earthministry.org. And they do a lot of ecumenical work. And I have links for you coming up. So if you don't want to scurry to write stuff down, but the author of this is Jessica Zimmerly. And I'm just having just a small selection here. Hi, Connie. So here she goes. She says, early last year, and this was in 2017, early last year, I found myself overwhelmed at a conference for young adults in ministry. So she's a young adult. You know the feeling, that creeping realization that one person can only do so much. A mentor noticed my discomfort and sat down for a conversation that would completely shift my perspective. He listed 5 types of leaders: apostles, shepherds, evangelists, teachers, and prophets. Then he asked which I think I am. Without enthusiasm, I guessed the shepherd. Interesting, he said. I'd rank shepherd low for you. I think you're a prophetic leader. My initial reaction was, whoa, don't put that on me. In my mind, being a prophet meant being the next Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I could easily brush that notion aside with degrading self-talk, she says. I'm not that kind of leader. With a smile, my mentor encouraged me to consider the prophet differently. Instead of the person whom everyone looks to for inspiration, what about the prophet who creates inclusive spaces to uplift voices that aren't being heard? How about the prophet with heightened awareness of our interdependence, called to heal where we are broken and celebrate where we are not? And that article goes on, but that's our centering piece, and that's just the snippet that I thought really spoke to our mission today. Clayton, Beth Roop is emailing me. Do you mind reaching out to her with the link? Thank you. So just with that first centering piece, does anything stand out to you, or what is speaking to you now? How are you? What's happening inside of your mind as we hear that? Hi, Robert.
I think the phrase creating space kind of comes to the surface in so many ways, just a breathing space in the midst of all the things that are going on as we listen to the news and listen to the past 2 years voices, but also a physical space to continue to observe and appreciate the earth and the gifts it holds.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
So this is Becky. Good. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can.
This is just a miracle. I'm sitting in here in this parking lot talking like this. Well, anyhow, what I was thinking when you read that was the idea of inclusivity. And of course, now we're in 2022, so people are talking about inclusiveness, but so many people don't really mean it.
Mm.
And so when we read, if you read the classic works on leadership, it might be kind of mentioned when you talk about democratic, small d leadership. But I think that's one of those things that we're going to have to work on. So I'm trying to say, and it makes perfect sense when you have a decision to make. You should make it with with everybody who is affected if possible, or as many people as possible. But, you know, we don't always do that.
Isn't that something? I mean, that's a very live issue. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We will be talking
Definitely.
a little bit today about, I will briefly mention some resources that help us see a non-dominant perspective on a lot of these issues, which I think goes to really embracing inclusivity, and where does our wisdom and where does our collective wisdom come from? And is it narrow? So good. Thank you for that.
Well, and I wonder also if in some ways that kind of inclusivity is within that, the term of covenant as well. And so when you think about covenanting with each other, there's automatically a sense of inclusivity as opposed to a top-down decision or a contract or that sort of thing. So it seems like it's a kind of a churchy word, but I think it automatically brings you into a sense of we're all in this together, and so we all decide together.
I like that, because that's so disciple-y with that the democratization of that decision making.
Disciple-y, that's
So disciple-y, I love it. Great. Beth, I just read a snippet from a newsletter, and I was asking people what they heard in that, and I will share that happily with a link coming soon to a screen near you. So in order to get into this conversation about Earth Sunday, what I'd like to achieve together, right, this is all about collective wisdom. I have nothing particularly new or unique, except that we have a forum to really share what is God speaking now, and what can Earth Sunday, what forum can that be for us as disciples who, as Christians who care about creation justice and creation care and eco justice. I'm going to share my screen because visuals are everything. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so this is where we're going to go. I got to move my people. Y'all are in the way. Okay. Here's where I'm thinking today's discussion is just going to go. We have three major pieces. Earth Sunday possibilities. And I'm just going to throw some things against the wall. We're going to talk about them. Things might stick for you. If you are leading a congregation, this might be a useful way for you to wrap your mind around what direction you want to go as you think about what is a theme for Earth Sunday, or what's an emphasis that we're going to try to wrap our minds and resources around this time. And then we're going to talk just a little bit about the biblical inspiration for creation care, or really, is there a particular, line from a theology that really hits home for this, for where your spirit is on this. And then finally, what are some of those resources for drawing closer to creation care and eco justice? So that's what we're trying to accomplish today. Okay. So when I look into, if you don't know, I had the honor of doing the creation care certificate through Lexington Theological Seminary. And so through that, I really learned a lot about how people speak about doing eco justice. And I think that it's not always like straightforward and always presentable if you're just doing like the searching online. So I kind of curated this collection of themes that seem to come to the surface the most when people talk about creation care for worship. So this is not about the activism and the civic engagement. This is not about a particular issue. This is really about where does the dust settle on the themes of creation care for worship and sacred ritual, I should say. And so the first one is we are the body. And this, of course, is about reconnecting to our ecology and how we are individual parts, but we function as a whole. And there are so many resources out there, of course, that deal with the image of the body. And I'm going to read a little bit of one of my favorite theologians who talks about the earth as the body, which is Sally McFig. She's amazing. Another one that stands out is just the wonder, the splendor of the planet and the possibilities and the majesty of the creator, and just how approaching that theme spiritually is extremely life-giving, and wonderful. Who knows where your congregation is and what you believe would work and would really resonate with you and your unique ecolocations, but I think the wonder is a really great option. And so another one is weathering the storm. This one has more of an activist bent. This one, it puts a lot of language to doing justice. And so I think that's a perfectly good lens for building a spiritual ritual around, or doing a worship service around. I think it takes a little bit of pre-work and a little more buy-in than the other themes. But then finally, breathe, O breath of God. And I've kind of just come up with these names, like these aren't like official names, I've just sort of determined them for you. Breathe, O breath of God. Where there seems to be lifelessness, God breathes new life. This one comes out of sort of a response to eco grief. I see a lot of writers and ministers going down the road of kind of taking care of the soul in the midst of the disappointment that we often feel when we think about the ecological crisis. I know for me, a major part of my journey is shame. And we've talked about that in the previous creation care dialogue, that whether I meant to or not, I'm part of the problem. And I exist in a system that is not doing justice to the planet. And so for me, I can articulate that part of my journey has been grief and shame. So breathe, O breath of God is sort of a way to respond to that. So, and you can really take that in any direction that you want, of course. But I wanted to, okay, so this little blue, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but this little blue box here just means I have a quote to share, and that's the color of my bookmark. So I'm reading from Native. This is Identity, Belonging, and Rediscovering God. It is by Kaitlin B. Curtice. She is a member of the Potawatomi Nation and a Christian. So she has a really cool perspective, Becky. I know we were talking about different perspectives. And I just wanted to read, when it comes to the wonder, I said, putting language to the splendor and beauty of the planet, her systems, and the creator. And I love what she says about the importance of language. And so I'll just name that first. Language is wrapped around everything else in a culture. No matter what you speak or where you're from, it's sacred. It's connected to identity, to ethnicity, to soul, to mystery. It is the way we move, the way our hearts speak, the lens through which we see the world. Without language, we are lost. And finally, I know that this language learning, and she's saying of the Potawatomi language, will be our legacy, the thin line that carries us generations down the road. And I don't think we are in a dissimilar place. I think that we, the Christian church, especially a mainline Protestant denomination, is in a place where we have a lot of language reclaiming to do. Feel free to disagree with me, but I think that that is a beautiful call and a witness to what that journey is. I see that there's, thank you, Clayton. Thank you for putting that up there in the chat. So just with that, I'm gonna pause. Is there something that is stirring in you when I name these categories? Does this align with what you wonder about or what you have seen in the work of ritualizing and worship the Creation Care Initiative?
I just want to say that I think that that's a helpful way of framing it, because when it comes time to think about how we might ritualize things on the Sunday that we're lifting this up, sometimes we feel like we have to do all the things, and to choose one direction and say, no, we're going to really lean into weathering the storm, or we are the body, and not try to hit everything. So I appreciate you doing that as a way of helping me to edit.
Oh, good. I'm so
glad. The ideas.
Awesome. Good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for saying that. Anything else come up for anybody? Or maybe there's a glaringly obvious missing piece?
Well, I think that going back to the reflection that you read at the very beginning, the young woman saying that she felt inadequate. I think we all feel that way daily, minute by minute. However, the reality is that God has called people throughout human existence and to go ahead and do what needs to be done. And these 4 categories help us to connect in ways that leave us not so scattered, I guess, more focused is a better way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting what happens when you narrow the focus. I feel like so much more is possible when you've really done the work of narrowing.
Right.
For me, that was always the hard part of writing a paper. It's like my scope starts out like this, and then but then you can really put good and intentional thought and resources and energy into the narrowing, into the focusing. So I think that's a really good point. Shall we look at the next thing where I believe there's going to be more dialogue? Great, let's do it. I always forget how to, okay, my people, let's do this. We have biblical inspiration for creation care and eco-justice. But here is a set of, kind of similarly, a set of focuses. Okay, so the first one, and I like mentioning this one, so you've heard me say this in the previous creation care dialogue, but the first one, community of creation. And this is a really cool way of doing not just like community work, thinking about ourselves in the whole, and that comes back into we are the body, but this goes against the dominion paradigm that is so prevalent in how Christians talk about the planet and our role on the planet, within the planet, to the planet, over the planet, that humans would have dominion over other non-human creatures. And I am reading from, this is coming from Ask the Beasts by Elizabeth Johnson. I will probably bring this book up in every creation care dialogue, so you might as well just buy it. I'm just kidding, of course, but I think it's important because this can do some of that work of language reclaiming that we just talked about on the last slide. And so here, just a small piece here. This is referring to Genesis 1:28, of course. At the time that this text was written, the natural world was seen as a wild place, at times threatening to human beings, unlike the reverse situation today, when human activity poses a danger to nature's survival. There were lions in Israel. Let's not forget that. There were actual lions in Israel. Some scholars surmise that in its historical context, the dominion text gives legitimacy to the human need to secure a protected place in the midst of a powerful natural world that intimidated them and that they could not completely control. The Genesis mandate, though, to have dominion, clearly does not give human beings permission to dominate the natural world. God has just created all living things, blessed them and their fertility, and pronounced them all good. Having dominion in the royal sense means that humans are to be God's representatives, carrying out the divine will that other creatures should flourish. I obviously skipped a little bit, and so that whole royal sense is something she talks about before, but I really like that she is giving us language. She's giving us sort of a foundation for reclaiming what the relationship is for humans to non-human creatures. And she does this great work of evening the playing field, and there is no, and this is, the subtitle for this is Darwin and the God of Love. And so it goes against this survival of the fittest. We must dominate in order to survive, and if we've survived, that means that we're supposed to be the dominant species, and she goes against that. I could say more, obviously, because I'm obsessed, but So I really like that. I really like that narrative. So what does that mean to you? What does this other paradigm mean? If you're talking, you're
In a way, where I was thinking about our dog. We don't, well, we have dominion over her somewhat, but she's part of the family. So if you start thinking about animals, for example, as part of the family of God, and people, don't want to ascribe any kind of emotional characteristics to any animals, but I'm just thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking about how our animals, if we start thinking about animals a different way, oh my gosh, I just did it. We wouldn't eat them. I just had a chicken sandwich. If I had thought of that chicken as part of my family, I might not have wanted to do it. That might be too simplistic, but that I think that's why some of us struggle with eating meat. Plus, the whole notion that having dominion over anything else isn't necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, that word dominion seems like it needs to have a different. We need to do something other than dominion.
I think that also opens up the possibility for a different conceptualization of leadership, which is being concerned for and taking care of the greater good. And so within that is, the idea of community, taking care of everyone, every piece of what constitutes that community, and being just conscious that that's really what real leadership is. Leadership, using your power over others, is not leadership. In my mind. Well, it's my definition, so I got to make
it. Yes, you do.
And I'm sticking by it.
I like that. I love that. Thank you. Yeah. Good. Did anybody else have something to share about that, or did you hear something in that?
Sure.
I think this whole idea of recognizing ourselves as part of the community of creation is humbling, not just in a way of anthropomorphizing other beings, but in really humbling ourselves to see ourselves as part of a system. So even things like, should we eat meat or not eat meat, to take a step away from that question and look at how the natural world works, that we're not going to ask hawks to stop eating the things that hawks eat, and not going to ask the wolf not to act like a wolf, that they're all part of a system, but there's a sense that it is meant to be in balance. And so it's not so much about, do I take a life and consume it, or do I not do that? But in the ways that I do that, whether the life is a carrot or the life is a chicken, in the ways that I do it, am I disrupting the community system in such a way that beings can't continue to flourish? I mean, the planet dies if we don't take life. It's a part of the way that it has to happen, is that life gives way and dies, and something else then regenerates. But we're a disruptor to the system in the ways that we take. So I mean, I guess that's part of what it has done for me in messing with my head recently, is that it's not as simple as deciding which descriptor I'm going to take about what kind of an eater I am, but it really applies to everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And Chris, I think sorry, Beth, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the word balance used there is so important, in that we are disruptors because we create an imbalance in the way that we consume. And so, if we can, I think our role is to find balance in how we consume, because we're going to consume one way or another, or we're not going to live. And so how do we have life? And I don't want to get into the next one too much, but how do we have abundant life and have that balance? And too often, I think the systems of domination have been about preaching scarcity. There's really not enough.
Right.
And so there's not enough resources. There's not enough room in the life after. There's not enough love to go around. There's not enough. And in that ideology that there isn't enough, in that scarcity paradigm, then we overconsume because we want to make sure we get enough. And as we overconsume, we hoard to make sure that we never run out. And so we create the imbalance. And so I think one of the important parts of that balance is understanding the true abundant life, or the true abundance that we participate in, so that we don't feel like we have to eat 2 cheeseburgers today for lunch. We can eat one and we're going to be okay, or that we don't have to buy more plastic containers to store our food, or whatever it is that we're doing that creates that imbalance. We don't have to do that because truly there can be enough, and we don't have that fear. So I think that's that balance and the idea of scarcity driving the imbalance is a really important part.
Yeah, thank you for saying that.
I think there's an identity piece in this too. And in claiming our full identity. And I think about, and I know a little bit, Native spiritualities in terms of respecting when they hunt, they respect the animal. They use all of the parts of the animal. And we tend to look at, what's the prime cuts, what's the, there's a lot of waste that we don't think about. And so we don't fully respect other species. We don't fully respect creation. And I don't think we fully respect our own identity in terms of how God made us, where God placed us, and what it means to integrate that into this balance that you're talking about, and thinking about the balance. We have the capability of considering the ramifications of our actions, and yet we don't. We think short term rather than long term. We think, immediate needs rather than generational needs. And all of that, for me is that matter of the way we disrespect, creation, the way we disrespect ourselves. So.
I really hadn't heard it put in the words, integrate into the balance. And I wrote that down because I think that there's a lot that we could explore with just that phrase, integrating into that balance. So thank you for that. Any more reflection or thought or additions to this community of creation theme? And really upending the notion of dominion. Then let's check out abundant life out of nothingness. Of course, I would argue there is no such thing as nothing. But here is what, isn't that funny? Was that Jenny that left? Thank you.
Yes.
Here's what Sally McFay says about, oh wait, wrong color. Wait, hang on. Okay. Okay, let's start here. Ezekiel 37, 1-10 says, "Then he said to me, prophesy to these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you and you will come to life." I always thought this was such a defeatist, such like a grief, like a grieving part of Ezekiel. And it's like, thanks for showing me this valley of just death and dryness and nothingness. But I think that one of the most important calls that we have in this work is naming what is broken, is naming that we are in a valley of dry bones, naming that our rivers are receding, naming that our forests are being deprived of their life cycles, naming that the planet is a life, it is one life made up of many, many lives, but naming that we don't treat it that way. And so I think that this passage from Ezekiel is one of those places that we can start to say, we have like the divine authority to name what's broken. And we need that divine authority. And I think here we have this sense of nothingness, but even with that, even with staring into a valley of death, we have these words that breath will be entered into this and life will come even in this place. So there isn't nothing here. There is something here, even though what you see is a valley of death and dry bones. So with that, if you're looking for more of a gospel perspective, I'm reading from Church of the Wild. This is, how nature invites us into the sacred. I like like one of the quotes that somebody said about this. This book is a prayer. I love that. By Victoria Loorz, Loorz. Okay, just reading from a piece of chapter 6 that says, "In the beginning was the Logos. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. This was God in the beginning. All things came into being through this, and apart from this, nothing came into being that has come into being. And the Logos became flesh and dwelt among us." John the Evangelist, 1st century CE. The idea of a divine indwelling at the center of the whole universe, with every unique part in conversation with the others, has many names. I like this part. What Thich Nhat Hanh, another non-Christian voice, what Thich Nhat Hanh names the web of interbeing is aligned with what Robin Wall Kimmerer from Braiding Sweetgrass, that book, calls sacred reciprocity. David White calls it the conversational nature of reality. And quantum scientist David Bohm uses the term implicate order. I just love the idea that there is an indwelling of the sacred, and life comes out of what appears to be the nothingness, but at the very center of what we see as nothingness is Logos. So now I think that is the kind of message that has a lot of life, and can have a lot of ritual surrounding it. So when we just given some of that I've shared, what is standing out to you? What is sparking some of your passions? Have at it.
So Hannah, I feel like maybe you've seen some of my PowerPoints. And so you just talked about David Bohm. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important I think it's important for me to say that he's a physicist. And it was his ideas of how atoms interact with one another that caused him to start thinking about how human beings do the same, and his ideas about dialogue and what is a healthy dialogue, and how dialogues are really the mechanism by which human beings solve problems. And he talks about the difference between generative conversations where new ideas are introduced, and I think the other one are destructive conversations where, I can't believe you said that. I know better. Here's where we're going, kind of conversations. And so perhaps one of the things that could come out of this might be facilitating conversations within our own tribe, so to speak, about how can we have a generative conversation about what we can do, what we need to do, what we're called to do.
Mhm.
So, just the whole idea of a physicist coming up with something that really, to me, is very, very profound.
Mm, mhm, mhm. I really love that. I love that we are starting to really get a glimpse of, we've had language of our interconnectedness in our sacred spaces for a long time. I love that we are able to stand with science when it comes to that interconnectedness. And I think being able to name that, and again, reclaim that language that these two things do go hand in hand and they do not stand separate. Nothing stands separate from another thing. I think that that's such an important point to make. And I mean, to have discussion around how closely those things are related is going to be, it's going to be mind changing.
Mhm.
What else?
Well, I'm thinking a little bit more about the scripture itself, and that, if you go on with the story, of course, all of a sudden, everything is connecting.
Mm,
And it goes from layer to layer to layer. It's the bones, it's the connective tissues, it's the sinews, it's whatever it might be, until there's something, but it's still kind of a lifeless form until the breath enters.
mm,
And it gives you a sense of, okay, we can talk about the connection of all of creation, and we can talk about creation care, but at least for me, it adds a huge amount of dimension and depth to then say the why behind it all, which to me is the breath. You
mm,
blow that breath into it, and then all the connection comes to life.
mm. I really like that. And I think that, yeah, that's definitely a place that, as an image that really works, I think, in a lot of different ways when it comes to people gathering and ritualizing. I think it's a great image.
Mhm.
For me, a part of this, this is the biggest part that takes us to a place of humility and mystery.
Mm,
And the reason for that is you mentioned David Bohm as a physicist. We have lived in an age, and my generation, where science was the end all, the be all, and we will find the solutions, and then there was this break of quantum physics, and there was mystery again, and there was this, the farther we know, the less we understand,
mhm,
and something more of creation to discover. And I think that one of the things that we need to reclaim within our current cultural milieu, and also that we need to stand against, is this sense that we are the end all of everything. And so the place for humility, the place for mystery, the place to say that there is a God who is continuing to act in a creative manner, that we understand the character of God, but we may not understand the end product of where God is going with this. That there is this sense of continually being invited into that mystery, and into that a sense of the abundant life out of nothingness, the whole sense of creation being this reclaiming and reshaping and repurposing of the stardust and of what's already there. So to explore that, and to bring that into this sense of nothing to me suggests valuelessness. And when we think about God creating out of nothing, it's like, okay, nothing has value, but when we think that God reshapes and reforms, then everything is imbued with a value of what is, what was, and what's going to be.
Everything is imbued with a value, and how our systems have corrupted what value is and what it means to the whole.
Yeah.
I think that's a really great perspective. I'm thinking about what I'm asking, I'm asking the panel here, which is you, what are some of the biblical moments that are really speaking to some of the things you're bringing up?
One place that I find is the mistake that perhaps wasn't a mistake in the garden, or not in the garden, after with the resurrected Christ being mistaken as a gardener. I don't think that it was a mistake for that to be a mistake. I think that provides us with an image to follow after of caring for creation and tending to it, and maybe giving us an alternative vision of what dominion means, in kind of reconnecting with what that original vocation was of created humanity.
An image that's become more powerful for me is God as the refining fire. And again, that's taking what already is and refining it and reshaping it and remolding it. And God doesn't destroy. God refines.
Chills. You guys are giving me chill. I love that.
I think another passage that may be kind of odd is in Jeremiah, where the prophet's under house arrest, and they come to him and ask, since he is the next in line, if he would invest in the family property or buy the piece of land. But the piece of land is occupied, and some of it is burning, homes have been destroyed and crops have been destroyed. And his response is yes. And I think that goes to us, in a sense, are we all in with a broken world? Are we willing to step forward and invest ourselves in it? And to me, that's a starting place. When we talk about dominion, the idea of a human-centered dominion or a God-centered dominion. And I can't see through God's eyes, but I can watch God as God looks upon creation. And I think that's the spiritual meditational aspect of it. And I think, as I think Karen said, it comes to life essentially with the breath of God. And I think with creation, it's the soil. When we look upon the soil as a beginning place, a foundational piece, even for climate change and for so many other things that disputes over land. But I think it comes from the beginning with, we can despair because things don't look too good and we're asked to buy into it. But we say yes, because God continues to breathe life into us and life into the world. And to me, looking upon God is like looking upon a mother who looks upon a newborn child, in a sense of, I see that love. I can't see as a mother sees a newborn child, but I can see that mother's love. And so I think this devotion and continual drawing near to God is very important in care of creation.
This is why they pay you the big bucks, you guys. It's really good thoughts. I really love these thoughts. Anything else standing out about biblical images or passages or people that are resonating with what we've discussed so far on this slide? Really good stuff.
I can't help but think of Ukraine, how.
Okay, your voice has been muted.
I was okay. Go try it again,
I
Connie.
think Connie needs to mute her device.
I need to mute it?
Yeah, just your device.
I did.
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I can't help but think of Ukraine when you were, all talking about the recreating and how it has been devastated and how we are going to be called to recreate the world.
Mm. And I think what you're pulling up, at least as I see it, is sort of this recognition of devastation, acknowledgement of the devastation, and the response to that being regenerative, regenerate, rejuvenate. And I think that that's a useful framework too, is like where there is devastation, there is rejuvenation. Great. Let's look at this last bullet point, this we are the body, and I apologize, Ezekiel 37 really wasn't meant to be in there. I just used that to copy the format, and then I forgot to delete it. So Sally McFague is actually spelled S-A-L-L-I-E, not S-A-L-Y. And she has this image of the body, and I think that as disciples, we can really do something with the image of the body. So what we have, I'm just going to write a few lines, like 3 sentences total, but I think they really capture sort of her essence of what this theological paradigm is. She says, bodies are important, period. We ought to honor and love them, our own and others. The body model of creation being a body gives us both an ecological and a justice context for doing theology. For it involves a planetary perspective while focusing on the most basic needs of human beings. The model of the universe as God's body suggests both an anthropology and a theology, a way of seeing our proper place as inspirited bodies within the larger body, within the scheme of things, and a way of seeing both the immanence and the transcendence of God. God as the inspirited body of the whole universe. I highlighted one last thing. The body is the home for everything. And I think that notion of home is so crucial, that the body is the home of everything we value, both in ourselves and in others. I won't read her explanation of that, but I like the idea of the body as home. So with this last one, I have one last thing to read on the we are the body, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on just that idea of the body. What can that mean for us?
I think one of the things it means for us is that we really need to push back against this idea that our faith is somehow separated from incarnated experience. And I think it's too often we try to make the religious life something that is somehow separate from embodiment. But if we truly take incarnation seriously, and we take the cosmic Christ at the beginning of creation and taking on form, and then Jesus himself taking on our own bodily form. Like you said, we honor not only other people's bodies, but our own, and not only our own, but also other people's bodies, and not just other people's, but all bodies, including the bodies of the more than human world. And I think it gets us back again to this idea of there is no way to exist and be in this created system without a taking and returning. And so, if I take this tree to make my table, in what way do I do that in ways that honor the whole system? Anyway, so I think it touches on so many things, and there are all of those things that we can actually touch that are a part of our ritual life. And think about how they go back. It's like everything you touch, whether it's the chalice that takes us back to the clay, which takes us back to the soil, or if it's the table, which takes us back to the tree, which takes us back to, there's just so many things, literally, for us to consider that are part of the embodiment of our faith and our ritual.
Wow. Really cool. What else? Well, we have 9 minutes left. So I'm just going to finish with this last bullet point here by reading about wholes. You know, we are, as disciples, movement for wholeness. I think it's interesting to put language to what it means to think in terms of wholes. Okay, a spiritual worldview. Oh, this is from Spiritual Activism. I read this once a year. A spiritual worldview, as opposed to a worldly worldview, permits not just sensory and rational impressions of reality, but also those that come from intuition and feeling. This radically widens the scope of what can be known and allows for a sense of meaning to inform our understanding and experience of reality. When we try to discern what makes you, you, we find ourselves talking in intuitive terms about your essence. And this is the whole you, which this author goes on to say, your essence is your whole you, and your parts make up your whole essence. And so I think that we could probably have another hour-long conversation on wholeness. And maybe someday we will do that. But I hope that this has served as little nuggets of inspiration that you can then take with Great Lakes Green Chalice. We're here to continue these conversations, not just once a month, but with you if you'd like. So I want to share with you some of these resources for moving forward. So Great Lakes Green Chalice, GLGC, is offering one-on-ones with you, with your team, with your ministry, with your neighbor. I am here to help build conversation, enthusiasm, and ideas around what your creation, care, and eco-justice initiatives are. That could just be a sounding board. You could come to me and say, hey, look, I think I want to do a little bit more with one of these concepts for creation for Earth Sunday. I would love to have a conversation with you about what resources I see. Or maybe you have a green team that you'd like to chat with. That I hope that Great Lakes Green Chalice, and Clayton is a part of this too. He's just not on my screen right now. Where are you? There you are. Right? Yeah. So we are here to be a part of your journey. And so I hope that if you have inspiration that you would like to have a sounding board with, or if I can create some kind of useful resource for you, that is where my passions are. That is where our passions are. We are here for that. So Earth Sunday initiatives. I don't know if you can still see my screen here. Stand by, I have to do this differently to move everything around. I have links for you. And okay, are we still sharing? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I've just listed Great Lakes Green Chalice newsletter. That's a way to always receive information about creation care dialogue, civic action that we're going to try to do as the Great Lakes Covenant Relationship Regional thing. And then I have put together a link of, it's just like a document that has several links for lots of different versions of Earth Sunday resources. And so that looks kind of like this, not that, this. Are you seeing my screen?
No.
No. Resume share.
There we go.
Oh,
Okay. Do you see this?
yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Clayton. All right. And so here we just have links that that you'll, if you're not on their email lists already, this is all in one place. Further down the document, this is just a screenshot, but further down the document is Carolyn Winfrey Gillette's Creation and Creation Care Topical Index. So she's put new texts to familiar hymns. And so you can use that to do that. So then here, this is just one of the many resources that Great Lakes Green Chalice can produce. This is a visual for you to have people sign up for different works. And so that might include, for instance, the top there, you see a podium. Someone is willing to give a minute for mission. I will sign up to do a minute for mission in worship. You see the dinner plate. I am willing to host an eco-friendly meal. I'm willing to, and you see the praying hands with the research. I'm willing to look at my local issues and develop a prayer list for these things, for the local issues that I've noticed in our ecolocation. You see the footprints there. I am willing to go to lead an eco walk, or lead a nature walk. You see the sunflowers. I am willing to plant native plants in the soil, in our soil. You see the book club thing. I am willing to to lead a book study or do a workshop on a book. And then you see the Green Chalice. I'm willing to be a part of a Green Chalice initiative, lead one or join one. And this is the sort of thing that, you know, can be a part of your Earth Sunday initiatives. And I can take a graphic like this and, you know, or a sign up sheet, I can do whatever you need. But giving you resources to help people on board on this mission. So, and this is just a you know, a silly example of what's possible, but I'm hoping that as we take this seriously and as we think about Earth Sunday as one of the most, I don't know, public discussions about eco-justice, that we that we're here to help, and that Great Lakes Green Chalice wants to be a part of your journey. So with that, are there any closing statements before I have us read something together?
I have a question.
Reflections, ideas.
Did you hear me? I have a question. This is Becky.
You're talking to this
Talking
laptop.
to
Good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Becky,
this way.
Becky's going to say.
I just had a
something.
question. Are all those resources on the website?
Let's see if we can read this together.
Yeah, like
You
all
all
those
see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
many out of one.
This is from Liturgies from Below. It's a wonderful resource for developing worship material. I found this, and I think it speaks to a lot of the conversation that we've had today. And I see that most of you are muted, and honestly, that might be the best way to do this. But I'd just like to close with this word, and then we'll be on our way. So let's read together, many out of one. God, we are many out of one, and so we pray to you, the one Almighty, asking for you to bless all and each of us, your sons and daughters. May your breath be spread and felt from the inner cities and towns, from the mountains, the hills, and the downtowns and garrisons. May your breath displace us in mind and heart and bodies far away from the many places of empire. Keep us all alive in justice, fight, and dreams. And send us forth all over this earth, out to the many places we have come from as one out of many. Amen.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for a wonderful Creation Care dialogue. I hope to see you in a month where we will be talking about solar panels. So if you have interest in that or information, I want to talk to you. But okay, so everyone's muted. I will see you next time. Mwah.